Welcome to myCTalkthroughs. Today we are in a swap-orama where we will be exploring different ways to swap values in C. So buckle up and hold on tight as we dive into the world of swap functions. It's going to be a wild and crazy ride, so who knows, you might learn something along the way. Let's have a look at this example. As you see, we have two integer values, a and b, which have assigned the values 5 and 10. Now we print out our before and our after, and in between we want to swap z values. So the first what you think about is, I will create myself some temporary variable, here maybe an integer called temp, and yeah, better always to assign some value to that, right? So in this case we assign a 0, and from there it's pretty easy to swap the values. It just takes place here by temp shall have the value of a, and a shall have the value of b, and b shall have the value of temp. That's a very simple way to switch values, and we will quickly double check if it really works just by running this code. So what we have here, before a was 5, b was 10, a was after a is 10 and b is 5. So obviously it worked, but this solution has several shortcomings. For example, we have a variable temp. We store all that value here and have to move it left to right, and it's not a very generic version to swap values, because it takes place here, but we don't know at what time we will need this. So in general it was better if we had some kind of swap function, and we want to try that. We are always willing to try new things, and in this case I will copy paste the same code here in. So if we have some single function for it, we just want to have some swap function, and we swap a against b. If we do so, we need to declare such a function. Then our temp value here is not necessary anymore, and for that we create as a function which returns nothing. It shall only change the values, right? And it has an int x and an int y, and it does nothing else but what we did before by putting in here, creating temporarily some variable and assign immediately the x to it, and x we want to be y, and of course finally also y can be assigned the value of temp then. From a syntactical point of view, this is totally legit, but as you know already, probably you know already, it will not work. If we run this code, a and b do not change, because the scope of our x and y is only within our function swap. And as long we do not find a way to circumvent that, we cannot change values here. What can we do? First of all, I copy paste this code again, because that will be our code we will work on now. we cannot access the values this way. We have to access it by pointers. So what we will handle over to our swap function are pointers to x and y. And if we change the pointers here, it will not work. We have to change the values which are stored at the places in memory where the pointers point to. So in this case, we have to add the asterisk here in front of the identifiers for our values. And that makes really the values behind to swap. So what we do here is we create temporarily some pointers which point at some spot in memory, and we assign the value to that spot. And here we read at that spot, look at the value, better to say we read here at the spot where y stored some value, and that value we read out and place into the spot where x is stored. So what we are doing here, imagine that we're post boxes. We go to and check our post box and we see, oh, I have the neighbor's letters in, and probably the letters from my neighbor are in other way around, and probably my letters are in my neighbor's post box. So we open here two post boxes, take the content out and exchange it. And that should work, but of course we cannot handle over the values here. What we have to handle over here are pointer values, and this we can do with an ampersand. That means swap whatever stands at the address where A is stored to that where the address of where B is stored resides. Let us try out if it works. No, here it does not work. Yeah, that is a simple thing, because here we want to store the value, which is this temp is not a pointer. It is a normal integer value, right? So we want to assign the normal value which we temporarily stored into temp. So second try. This is because I messed up here. Okay, before A is 5, B is 10. After swapping the values, A is 10 and B is 5. This is already a completely legit solution for a swap and to create a swap function. But I want to show you another version, because if we stick to the idea of post boxes and to exchange the letters from the post boxes, there is another version to swap values. We could also swap the labels of our post boxes, and that I want to explain you in another example. Now it starts to become some weird and crazy. First of all, we start with the same example as before. But here, already here, I don't want to handle integer A and B. Instead, I create myself two pointers. I create myself a pointer A and assign already the address to it where A lives, or where the value from A is stored. And the same thing I do with a pointer B and assign the value where the value of B is assigned, or where the pointer B lives, where the value pointer B is pointing to lives. So it makes sense at least. So in that case, we also have to change how we access or how we write out or read out the values here. So in this case, we want the value at the place where pointer underline A is pointing to, and we want also the value where pointer B is pointing to. And here, of course, we must make sure that these values are then shown and not A and B. Oh, that we don't want. Paste, paste. So that will give us the same value. We only check the pointer instead of the value itself in the first time. So there is an int, there are two int, and there are two pointers to the same int. So what we can do now is the same thing we want to show afterwards, after our swap took place. And we can do so just the same way by copying the same spot here, the same line. What we do switch now here are not A and B. We want to switch the pointer A and pointer B. So we want to switch this and this. We switch to addresses only. So in that case, we also have to prepare a complete different swap function. And for that, we take here not an int as a pointer to x. We take an int as a pointer to x. And we take an int as a pointer to y. And our int, our temporary int, does not need to store a big value or some struct or whatever temp could be. In this case, it's only a pointer anymore. So we switch here and turn our temp from an int to a pointer to an int. That's not quite right. What we want to do here is we want to store here some pointer value. And that pointer value will be a pointer value, dereferenced. Oh, that is really hard to get, but everything is totally fine here. The rest can stay as it is. The only thing is here that we do not really copy out, I say now, the values. We do not take the letters out of the post box. We just take our name signs and exchange it to the post boxes. Let's have a look if it works. So before, pointer A points to a spot where A lives, and that spot has a value of 5 storing. B has a value of 10 storing. After changing the values where the pointers point to, the places in memory stay the same where the values are stored, but pointer A now points to what pointer B pointed to before and the other way around. So that's another way how you can switch values. Of course, all this code you can check out on your own in the repository. I hope you could get along with that. These are completely different ways how to swap values in the C programming language.